Hey guys, it's Anesha Collins of Unashamed Imaging based in Orlando, Florida, and I'm so excited to be a part of this year's Mint Conference hosted by Ruby Melton of Brown Girl with a Camera. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like you were just getting opportunities and accolades and awards and recognition, and then for a moment you say to yourself, but how am I getting them? Like, it's gotta be pure luck. I'm not that good, and probably a plethora of other things. Well, that's often associated with imposter syndrome. A lot of people have it, especially women, and they don't even know it. I will be helping you to identify the negative parts of imposter syndrome and how you can tackle those, and also identify the strong parts, because there are some strong parts of imposter syndrome that can help you jump over that bridge and really start to see the value that you have, to really accept that you are good at what you do, you are putting in the time that you need to be successful, and get rid of this negative association with imposter syndrome. I'm coming to you guys from Hurricane Irma. Isn't that interesting? Yes. Unfortunately, I was not able to make it out to the conference, and I really, really wanted to. I was really excited about it. But Mother Nature had different plans. So I got in contact with Ruby. We talked it out, and I'm still going to come to you guys about the content that I am excited to teach on. So I just want to give you guys a little bit of housekeeping disclaimer. If you hear any noise, remember, we don't have any power. So I do have two dogs running around. It's very hot, but we're going to make it through. I know you guys saw the video that I did to talk about it, because this is a topic that a lot of people actually suffer with or deal with. And it does kind of anchor you down if you're not able to either know what it is, like you feel it, but you may not know that that's what you're dealing with, or you have it and you don't have the tools to actually deal with it, as far as you know, there are good things that can come out of finding out that you have imposter syndrome. One, finding out that you have it, and then two, finding solutions to deal with it. So if you guys see me, I make periodically reference to my notes, but I'll just try to still keep engaged with you guys. All right. So one thing about imposter syndrome is that, for the most part, it normally affects a lot of females. It doesn't mean that males don't have it or can't be affected by it, but it normally affects a lot of females. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we are very creative. Our brains are they like to store and organize, and we like things a certain way, etc., etc. And so imposter syndrome tends to affect us a lot, because the first thing that we think of is, one, how is this possible? So whatever you're achieving or whatever you're doing, how am I doing this? How is this happening for me, etc. The next thing is that a lot of people focus on things that they can't control when it comes to imposter syndrome. So they find themselves, I would say, beating themselves up over variables that they can't change, instead of focusing on variables that they can change. Okay, so let's get started with the meat and potatoes, as I like to call it. So the first thing that you want to really do, and if you guys can, probably should have said this first, but if you can grab a piece of paper, and if by the time this happens, if Ruby can give you guys the workbook that I have, hopefully electricity will allow us to do that. But there's going to be a section there that I want you to take a minute, and I know a minute is really quick, but I want you to take a minute and ask yourself this question. And the question is, who do you think you are? Not what, because what is a physical thing. So, for example, when I say what, to make it easier for you guys, what would be more so like, what do you do versus who you are. So if you're, let's just simplify it. If you're a photographer or a cinematographer, that is not who you are as a person. And what a lot of people don't realize, and this does have to do with imposter syndrome, is that part of knowing who you are actually affects your business. And a lot of people really struggle with that, as far as knowing who they are as a person. And so when certain things happen, for example, if you get an award and you're like, man, how did I get that? How did I earn that, etc.? It's because you are organized, you are talented, you are able to run a business. So that's what I mean by who you are. So just take a moment to write down the question, and the question is, who do you think you are? So I'm gonna give you guys a few seconds to do that. Okay, so based on your response, whoever you think you are, you don't have to share that with the world, you can share it with yourself, but whoever you think you are, that is important. If you struggled, and don't feel bad because I went through it myself at one point, if you struggled with figuring out who you are, that is okay. That's a good place to start, actually, because that means you have work to do. If you know who you are, then you can easily move on to the next phase for dealing with imposter syndrome. But if you are if you couldn't figure it out, that's okay. Don't beat yourself up. Give yourself some time. But we're gonna keep moving forward, because once you do that part, you can apply the rest. So I want to talk to you guys about a complex, and there's a complex which I thought was really cool. There's a speaker that I listen to a lot, and her name is Caroline McHugh, and she talks about interiority versus inferiority. And if you need me to spell that, I'm going to do it in the quickest way. So interior, think like interior design, and then like itty on the end. And then inferior, think of like feeling beneath. So she talks about those two things, right? And with complex interiority, it's basically an uncomparative. So what we do is we all come with our own sense of magic, our own sense of what makes us stand out, what makes us different. So for example, Ruby started Brown Girl with the camera. And she was able to start that because there was something within her that knew that she can carry that type of platform. Whereas myself, I do more weddings. I've worked with organizations like the NFL and etc. So there's something within me that's able to deliver that type of service for those type of clients, right? Someone who may not have what we have as far as our character build up, as far as our business ethics, etc., may not get those opportunities. And it doesn't make Ruby or myself better. It just means that we're molded a certain way to be able to achieve or handle certain tasks and opportunities. Now, what happens is when someone like us gets those opportunities, and maybe we get an award, or the fact that, like, for example, like I said, I got to work with the NFL. When you have imposter syndrome, what will happen is this: you'll say, "How did I do that? Why did they choose me?" Et cetera, et cetera. And so that's where imposter syndrome comes in. Instead of saying, you know what, I had this awesome opportunity, I was able to work with a really big organization, and I had a great time. That's where you don't take your accomplishments and say, yes, I did that. So Ruby should be very proud that she's running Brown Girl with a camera, and it's successful, and it's successful to the point where other people are starting similar organizations because they were influenced by what she did. So going back to the inferiority and the interiority. So now on the flip side, when you deal with inferiority, which is combined with superiority, right? So when you feel superior, you need this. I found this like so cool that when she's talked about this, I was like, wow. So when you feel superior, you actually need other people so that you can feel better than them. So for example, when you need other people who you know aren't as good as you, so that you can feel like, yes, I'm the best. So it's almost like that quote, I know you've heard it before, people say you should never be the smartest person in the room. If you are, then something's wrong with the people that you're around. Inferiority, normally people have a fragile ego, and this is directly combined with imposter syndrome. So I wanted to share that with you guys because that really helped me when I really first discovered that I was dealing with that. So the most visible that you are, those are the people that are willing to share with the world. And most of the time, people who share with the world, they feel like other people think or see things in them negatively, and other people may not even be thinking of those things. So that's another note or key for dealing with inferiority when it comes to imposter syndrome. So remember, you have interiority, inferiority, and superiority. So if you need me to go over the three, I'll just kind of do it in a simple way. So superiority means you need other people around you who you know in your brain are less talented than you are, or whatever it is that you're doing, so that you feel, like the man or the woman. Okay. When you're inferiority, which is the bottom one, you feel that's the imposter syndrome. That's the fragile ego. Anyone can say anything, and it's like, oh my gosh, no. Or you attack yourself. And then the interiority is in the middle. So where you want to actually be is the interiority, which is what I use Ruby as an example. That she knew she wanted to start Brown Girl with a Camera. She started it. If you read the story behind Brown Girl with a Camera, the whole hashtag thing, the history is really amazing. But she knew what she had in her, and she also knew what it was going to do for others. So where she's at is a good example of interiority. All right, so let's move on. So some of the solutions that I wanted to share with you, staying in that realm of the three tiers, is this is going to sound super funny because a lot of times in business, people talk about outsourcing, right? But no one talks about outsourcing your identity. And a lot of people do that. When we go to others and we're looking for our identity in what other people say or think about us, that's outsourcing your identity. And if you rewind back to where I started this topic, my first question was, who do you think you are? Not who do other people say you are. Get it? So one solution that I have, and like I said, we're gonna keep going, but this is to deal with the three tiers, is to stop outsourcing your identity to people or circumstances. So when you have too much or too many external contributors, too many people coming in and telling you what you are or what you aren't. And I know it sounds weird because it's like what you aren't probably trumps, especially if it's negative, obviously, right? But they're both bad in their own way, because on one end, if you have too many exterior contributors, then you seek validation from other people. Then you need that for yourself to thrive. When you have too much negative contributors, then you find yourself not believing in yourself because of negativity. Now, I want to stay there, and like I have a lot more that I'm still talking about. But what you need to be conscious of is not everyone is for you. You're not meant to be friends with everybody. One of my biggest mottos is quality over quantity. Everyone's not going to like you. You don't need to be popular to be successful. I can keep going. I have so many. And you need to realize when you need to remove yourself for someone. A lot of times, and I see this on social media a lot of times people will say stuff like, I'm so grateful, whatever higher power you believe in, right? I'm so grateful that X removed these people. And when I read that or I see that, sometimes I kind of chuckle, because I'm like, how do you know that the higher power didn't remove you from their life? A lot of times we're doing the reverse, as if we're always the victim, and so is removing them from your life. So that has a lot to do, like I said, with external contributors, and you want to be mindful of that. Think of a publication when you get published, and sometimes you get denied because what you've created doesn't fit that platform. It doesn't mean you're stuck. It doesn't mean that it's that you take it personal and put your camera down or whatever you do, or stop making flowers, whatever you do. That just means that you're not a fit for that platform. So that's a good comparison to help you guys. Just checking, make sure the battery's good. All right. So the next thing is I want to talk about your response to accomplishments. When you get an accomplishment, celebrate. It doesn't mean you have to necessarily brag, and I know a lot of people jump to social media, but celebrate that. Like I talked about Ruby and Brown Girl with a Camera, she should be happy that she started this movement. People love it, and it's grown, and it's big, and and it's influenced others. That's a celebration. When you get something successful happens, or you get an opportunity, like Ruby has given me the opportunity to talk about this topic at the Mint conference. Imposter syndrome, along with some other things, I'm really passionate about, because there are things that either I've went through, I've studied, or I've helped someone get through, and I've seen the benefits of the better side of it. So when she asked, could I talk about this at the Mint conference, I was like, absolutely. So responding to your accomplishments and your successes, celebrate. When you fail at something, don't feel like I failed and it's the end of the world. Like, every failure has a lesson. There's something in there that you needed to know, and it will help you in the next phase. So let's move on. So the next thing is, these are kind of bullet pointed, and then I have some more meat. But so if I kind of rush through, just to let you guys know, you might want to take notes if you're a fast writer, or as Jasmine Star says, I'm not speaking too fast, you're just slow to listen. But one thing I want to say is reduce self-inflicted wounds. I learned a lot about this between family and friends, and I had this one mentor at the time. We still communicate. It was just a phase that I was in. And a lot of times he would mention how things aren't always as we see them to be. And sometimes it doesn't mean they're not happening, so don't confuse that. But they may not be as happening. They may not be happening as bad as we are perceiving them to be. So reduce your self-inflicted wounds, because this can actually magnify imposter syndrome. So what would that be like? Let me give an example. Let's say someone says, I'm just going to use me and Ruby to keep it simple, but let's say Ruby says, me and I don't know, Paula don't like you. And so I go, okay, now let's go back to the 3 tiers of superiority, interiority, and inferiority, right? If I felt my ego was fragile, I'd be like, oh my gosh, they don't like me and the whole world doesn't like me. That's a self-inflicted wound. Being in the middle is like, I don't need to be liked by everybody. And that's not a selfish mindset. I know a lot of people aren't used to responding that way, but it goes back to what I said. You're not meant to gel with everyone. You respect people and you keep it moving. But imposter syndrome has a lot to do with where your mind goes with what's being brought to you. And that's what I was talking about, the external contributors. Okay, so focus on what you can control. Like I mentioned, if you have to remove yourself from people, or you have to remove yourself from being around negativity as far as, oh, you're not good enough at this, or this or that and the third, remove yourself, because there's a reason why you're still getting opportunities. There's a reason why you're still successful at your business. There's a reason why you still have the people who matter around you. So focus on what you can control and what you can't. Move on, and anything that's negative that you feel messes with your sanity, keep it moving. It doesn't belong there. Another reason why people also deal with imposter syndrome, and this is the next section, is it has a lot to do with what are they trying to hide. So an example of this would be, maybe you're really silly, but because you run a business, right, and you're used to seeing business owners a certain way, you feel like, I have to be prim and proper all the time. No, you have to find your middle ground. And I'm not saying because you want to be silly that you just run your business that way, because some people may not take you serious, and some people may not want to work with you because they're like, oh my gosh, she's always so silly, or he's always so silly. But a lot of people also deal with imposter syndrome because they're trying to hide something. So going back to the original question that I opened this up with, which is, who are you? Whoever you are, that's what you need to hone in on. And you need to know that this is who I am, and that's your umbrella. So you start with who you are, and you break down, okay, when I'm dealing with these type of things, this is how I am. When I'm dealing with the accomplishments and opportunities, this is how I am. Another thing that you need to understand is that everyone, Beyonce, Obama, Trump, whoever you want to put in that category, successful people struggle too. Everyone struggles. Even Beyonce, there was a recording or an interview that she did where she talked about when she's on stage. That's where she had the whole Beyonce and Sasha, because Sasha was her stage person. Didn't mean she was fake. It just meant that there was a part of her that came out on stage that was just that part, and that's why she's able to perform that way. Whereas Beyonce is more introverted, more reserved, more timid. I don't want to say she's necessarily fragile, because I don't know her personally to say that Beyonce is more of the fragile part of her, but that's just a good example of understanding that famous people or successful people struggle with it as well. So don't be intimidated by people that you see have thousands of followers and they're shooting all the time. You don't know where their struggles and weaknesses are because they probably aren't telling you, and they don't need to. That's really not your concern as well. Um, so another struggle is that when people have imposter syndrome is they feel like they're being a fraud, like someone's going to find out. For example, let's say you're getting published, but maybe you struggle with off camera flash, but your image got published. You may feel like, oh my gosh, someone's going to find out that I really don't know how to use off camera flash. So fraud is another indicator of someone that's dealing with imposter syndrome. So I like this quote by Maya Angelou, and it says, I have written 11 books, but each time I think, uh-oh, they're going to find out now. I've run a game on everybody, and they're going to find me out. And I thought that that was like really cool that she even said something like that, because she's such a successful author. But she even has moments where it's like, am I a good writer? Is the content that I'm creating really that, that good, or that amount of quality? So I thought that that was really cool that someone on her level of influence actually dealt with imposter syndrome in her own way. So we're going to get into more of the solutions and then how to deal with different reasons why imposter syndrome might flare up. So the first is, what are you hiding? And this has to deal with imperfections. So a lot of people will hide flaws that don't fit into our success. So it's like, okay, I've been published here, there, and there, but I still struggle with skin tone. So that would be a flaw. Who we really are, and I think I honed in on this throughout speaking and in the very beginning. The version of perfection, and that would be who we project ourselves to be to people. So it's like, I can't mess up publicly, because if I mess up publicly, it's going to ruin my brand. That's the version of perfection that you're given to the public. And then another is being afraid that we don't have what it takes to repeat the successes that we've already had. And I think that this is probably something that everyone faces, because, a quick and easy example of this would be 2016 was a really successful year. How can I do that again in 2017? Or how can I do that again in 2018? So that is a form of imposter syndrome, because what you're basically telling yourself is you're not good enough to have a banging year once again, in a nutshell. Another way that we hurt ourselves when dealing with imposter syndrome is we're hiding our weaknesses instead of dealing with them. So what I would say is, when you deal with this part of imposter syndrome, you need to find people that you can trust in. You need to find people that you can talk to. And most importantly, and I wish I can add text to this, you need people who won't pacify you. Pacification is garbage. Even if you don't have imposter syndrome, it is the worst, because you are not helping yourself and the person is not helping you. Pacification is actually giving permission for your weakness. It doesn't help. Another way that we hurt ourselves is hiding our flaws, which I already talked about, and then hiding what you don't know. Now, you don't need to publicly go in, like, let's say we're talking about off-camera flash or even business knowledge. You don't need to publicly go on Facebook or social media and say, I don't understand how to do an LLC, or I don't understand how to do off-camera flash, or I don't understand how to shoot in natural light. You don't need to tell the public your flaws. You know what they are. So then you go to webinars, you reach out to people, you attend the Mint conference. I'm sure the speakers that we have, that the topics, they are talking about things that you may not know. So that's a way of you dealing with your weaknesses. And I'm sure some of you that have attended, that's why you came, because it was like, oh my gosh, people are talking about topics that I really want some more content on, or I want some knowledge on. So that's where you're going. You don't go to conferences just because you're bored. There's something that's grabbing you. Okay. So now let's go on to the next part. So imposter syndrome, what it does is it also makes you hide your fear. And we do this because most people look at fear a different way. we fear because we care. So instead of, I wouldn't even say like, because people associate fear with being afraid. You fear because you care about what it is that you're doing. So for example, if I was afraid to talk at the Mint conference, or even doing this right now, I would have been like, Ruby, I can't do it. And it's because you want it to be the best that it can be. So that is associated. Fear is associated with imposter syndrome. And I know you guys are probably sitting here like, wow, how are all these things associated? But they really are. When you sit down and you, like I said, go over those 3 tiers and then intermingle it or connect it with the things that I'm talking about in between, you'll see where you might have one. Hey, one is something that you deal with, and if you don't have none, then hey, help someone that may be dealing with them. So I'm gonna ask you guys a few questions, and I want you to once again answer them on your own, but they'll kind of stir your brain a little bit. So one of them is, how many are afraid to be creative? The next is, how many of you are afraid before shooting a wedding? How many of you are afraid to reach out to the more experienced for creative criticism and growth? Would you believe that these 3 questions alone, all of them point to imposter syndrome, because you're afraid and you're fearful? And what an example of it is, Daniel T. Davis. He's out of Texas. Really awesome photographer, kills off-camera flash, okay? If my weakness is off-camera flash, and because I felt inferior and I look at Daniel as superior, right? Or his personality to me, honestly, is interiority. But if, let's say, I looked at him as a superior, or he projected himself as superior, like, I'm better than you and you always suck in my eyes, then I would be afraid to reach out to him about my weakness. That's a form of imposter syndrome, because you feel like, or in that scenario, I feel like I am not good enough to reach out to him for help. All right, so we're still good. So I want you guys to, staying on the topic of fear, I want you guys to start looking at fear as an indication of what's important. So obviously, if I'm afraid to ask Daniel about something that is a weakness that I want to fix, it's important to me, or else I wouldn't care, I wouldn't be thinking about it, right? So the more fear you have, the more you should be able to move forward, not backwards. And this is where overcoming your weaknesses and dealing with imposter syndrome comes in. So push forward. For example, I wanted to do more speaking and teaching. Part of me felt like people would say, oh, well, how can she teach? She hasn't been, shooting weddings or whatever for as long as I have. You're right, I probably haven't, but I've owned a business for 8 years. I've also worked outside of the wedding industry. So you don't know the knowledge I have. I also used to work with unions who dealt with contracts. So I have a lot of background knowledge that I've been able to apply and use in business that a lot of people may not know about. So you should never assume someone's knowledge just because of the limited amount of internet research or internet feedback that you've been given. Unless you really do life with somebody, you don't really know someone's capabilities. So what I want you guys to do is take a few minutes, and you don't have to do it right now, but on your own, you can take a few minutes and share your fears. You want to write down at least your top 2 fears, okay? And then ask 2 other people. So you can do this as a group exercise, and then ask 2 other people to share theirs. Okay. So one of the solutions dealing with imposter syndrome when it comes to fear is you need to stop letting fear make decisions for you. You need to make decisions as such. I'm going back to the example. I really don't understand off-camera flash, or I don't know off-camera flash. I'm afraid to do off-camera flash. Who can I learn from? Get it? That's a solution. Fear likes to remind you not to screw up. And if you think about it, if you don't know off-camera flash, and let's say you're in a situation where you need to use it, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't use it because I don't know what I'm doing. Therefore, if you used it and you're trying to show off to people, oh yeah, I know what I'm doing, but in your head you really don't, that's where you could potentially screw up. Okay? So what you want to do, and I know we never hear this, is you want to be fearfully successful. go into things. I'm afraid as hell of this. Excuse me for saying it that way, but I'm going to do it anyway because I know the outcome and the benefits of doing it is going to be greater than me not doing it. And that also has a lot to do with, I know you've seen quotes about years later, you'll regret what you didn't do as opposed to what you did do. Okay. So let's go into, I have a few more things to talk about, and then we'll be towards the end. But I wanted to go into the next section, which is owning your success and the choices that you've made. So we talked about what you're hiding, which was the imperfections list that I went through. We talked about how we're hurting ourselves, sharing your fears, and some solutions. And like I said, going to it successfully. We talked about the 3 tiers that are often associated with imposter syndrome, which is superiority, interiority, which is where you want to be, and inferiority. We talked about who you think you are, self-inflicted wounds. I'm just really hitting the real like key points. It's all pertinent, but just so you have a reminder of what we've done so far. So owning your success and the choices that you've made. So what you want to do is you want to acknowledge that you're successful because of the decisions and choices that you've made. So like I mentioned with Ruby and Brown Girl at the camera, she has every right to be proud of herself. She has every right. That's a huge accomplishment. She took a culture that's usually not included in a lot of things and said, I'm going to bring everybody together and I'm going to educate them and I'm going to throw conferences and we're going to start a movement so that we can be seen. And Ruby has done a lot of successful things with Brown Girl on the camera. Like I said, other organizations have even started platforms similar or along the same lines because of Brown Girl on the camera. So she should be really, really happy about that and proud of herself. So these are some mantras to keep in mind with your success and choices that you've made. One, you've chosen to say yes and no to certain things. That's a great thing. And that's how you can help yourself dealing with imposter syndrome, because you don't need to say yes to everything. Everything is not meant for you. Also, you took big risks, and you learned from your mistakes. So dealing with imposter syndrome, a lot of people, going back to that perfection image, right? When you're dealing with your mistakes, you're able to say to yourself, hey, I messed up here. I'm learning from it. I'm not a failure. I'm still going to do whatever I need to do. So let's say you were doing a public speech and you dropped the mic, or you stuttered, or there was a typo in your slide. You know what I'm saying? In the moment, you might be like, dang, but you learn from it. Now, when you do more speaking engagements, you're going to do probably a spell check. You're going to have someone proofread your stuff. And if you make a mistake, you change it and you move on. I did a webinar about video marketing. All of my slides were perfect until the last one. And it was a letter that was like, one letter was backwards. And one of my friends who had attended it, she's also a photographer, she just privately messaged me and was like, hey, check this so that way when you do it again, it's not there. I didn't sit there and go, oh my gosh, there was a spelling error and now the whole presentation is ruined. And no, I went back, fixed it, saved it, and I'm speaking on that topic in Indiana next year at the Reset conference in front of a lot of people. I'm fine. You just learn from your mistakes and keep it moving. So let's talk about how to deal with imposter syndrome on your struggle days. Because like I said, it sometimes will rear its head out of nowhere, and you'll be like, oh my gosh, it'll be a few months, you'll be good, yes, I'm killing it, I'm the best photographer, best videographer, or whatever. And then all of a sudden something will happen, someone will say something to you, something will remind you of something, and you're like, and then there goes that inferiority, that fragile ego sparks. So on your struggle days, that's when you mostly feel like a fraud. And what you want to do is you want to spend some time with you. Go back to the beginning of this. Who are you? Look at your accomplishments. Like I'll share one that I've done. I go to my press page on my website and I look at where I've been published and what I've done. And I'm like, you know what? A lot of these platforms like the Huffington Post or the Knot, they are prestigious platforms. They care about the content that is on their page. They would not showcase garbage. Pop your collar and keep it moving. So here's the closing, and this is my final strategy for you guys. I had a little bit of jittering, so I'm hoping that we're still good. Okay, so this is my overall strategy. I've given you guys some tips and strategies in between, but you can take all that, and this is the closing of it. So your prescription, and if you know me, I used to be a nurse, right? Or I'm still a nurse. I still have a nursing license, just in practice. Your prescription for imposter syndrome is, one, you need to first recognize it. You need to recognize that you have it. And like I said, sit down and go through the questions that I asked. Go through your fears. You would be surprised, and most who go around, oh, I don't deal with that. It doesn't sound like me. You'd be surprised. You might have a tiny little ounce of it, but that tiny little ounce might be preventing you from doing something great. So first you want to recognize it. And what you want to do is, the way that you can recognize it is, one, when critical thoughts arise the most, then you want to assess how you feel. So for example, going back to the example that I gave earlier, if Ruby comes to me and Ruby says, me and Paula don't like you. And in that moment, the inferiority, fragile ego says, oh my gosh, she doesn't like me. And so that means Billy doesn't like me, and Kesha doesn't like me, and I don't know, whoever else doesn't like me. You need to recognize those things. In that moment, you either need to find your accountability partner or someone that you know you can trust that will either wake you up or tell you maybe there are some things you need to change. But like I said, external contributors who don't know you, have nothing to do with you, don't do life with you. And I want to put this out there because I know a lot of people deal with this. If you've even met somebody on the internet and you really haven't gotten time to really know them, I'm talking about on the phone, maybe you've met in person, maybe you've talked on Skype millions and millions and millions of times, that's different. You guys have developed a relationship. But if you only talk through Facebook statuses or Facebook Messenger or, I don't know, Instagram Messenger, whatever, you really don't know the person. If you can't like share intricate things about that person, you don't know them. They don't know you. They have no right to tell you your identity or who likes you or who doesn't like you or this, that, and the third. They don't know you, and that's the truth. So, but when you have imposter syndrome, you fall into that fragile ego, someone mentioning things like so and so don't like you or we don't like you or whatever will make you fragile because you're already fragile and you don't know who you are. You have to believe in yourself, believe in your accomplishments, know who you are, know the people that you have on your team. I'd rather have 5 people that are genuine and respect me than have 20 people who are not genuine and fear me for the sake of what they might lose if they're not connected with me. That's really something that you want to think about. Okay. The next thing is you want to assess. Do this. It's so easy. I'm telling you, like once you train your brain to do this, you're going to be like, oh my gosh. And you're going to apply it to so much stuff, even grocery shopping. That might be a little extra, but you'll do it. And the next thing is you want to assess. You want to use facts and data. Opinions are out. Imposter syndrome, if it's an opinion, it's out. You need facts and data. And even with doing that, you need to show, it's like, for example, I don't want to use that with this, but you just need to have facts. You'll figure out if something is factual or opinionated. That's probably the best way I can say it. You want to check what makes the facts and data untrue, not true. True is what will make you make your brain go crazy and do too much, because someone else's opinion you will never find truth of because it's in their head, it's their perspective, and it may not be true. So you need to find things that make it untrue. Example, going back to the original story, Ruby comes to me and says, me and Paula don't like you. But I have no problem with Paula. Me and Paula do life all the time. We're actually very open. I do life for her. She does life for me. She knows my ins and outs. The real issue is Ruby doesn't like me. That's the fact. You understand what I'm saying? That's what makes it untrue. That's Ruby's issue. So using it for yourself, if you have accomplishments coming in and you're like, oh, I'm not good, and I'm not good enough to handle this, this wedding of 24 people. I just need to do small, intimate weddings. Then you need to turn around and say, what makes this untrue? Look at your portfolio. Have you done weddings with 24 people? Have you done weddings with 300 plus guests? Have you been in resorts versus mini hotels or small outdoor? Then you can do it. You have to find things that make what's coming towards you untrue. Okay. And you also need to assess if what is coming your way involving imposter syndrome is hurting you. And the reason why I say this is because your body is meant to protect itself. Your brain is meant to protect itself, right? So your brain is not going to allow things to come into you to hurt you. So that goes into your success, that goes into the people that you deal with. And I know some of the stuff that I'm talking about, I may be going from business to personal. They really do have their place. They do connect somehow, some way. So don't think that why do I go? It's intentional and it does make sense. But going back to the body and the mental, and I go over this because of my nursing background. You are made up of three things, which is your physical, your spiritual, and your mental. And spiritual doesn't have to be Jesus. It's just something that I do strongly believe in. And so when your body feels any type of pain, you know that feeling you get in your stomach when it's like, okay, this just happened and I don't feel right, or something's not right. Pay attention to that. That is called discernment. Pay attention to when you're afraid of something. Why am I afraid? Go back to what makes this true, or the facts and data thing. Okay, pay attention to those things. Those are signals that you don't want to ignore, because once you start learning how to recognize them, and they're called your triggers, you'll be able to handle things better, and you'll see how either your imposter syndrome goes away or you slide more into the interiority section of the three tiers that I was talking about. Okay, so one thing you also want to do, and this is the last part, is you want to talk. And I know I talked about having accountability. I also talked about being in a group and doing this in a group setting. And I think that you should probably do this, the checks that I gave you and the questions monthly. And that's just to see where you're at. Because sometimes it's like you go to a doctor and they check you up and you do it. Usually you do a physical once a year, but throughout the year, if something happens or if you get sick, they say we want you to follow up in 4 weeks or 2 weeks or whatever. It's the same thing. You need to follow up so that you can either get rid of this or help yourself deal with it. Because depending on how deep your imposter syndrome is, that's how much work you have to do to get out of it, or at least to get to the level where you're no longer fragile and you have the interiority level. So what you want to do is you want to talk to yourself. And like I said, this is the closing. This is all a part of the prescription. So you want to recognize it, you want to assess it, and then last, you want to talk to yourself. And this means remind yourself of your why. That goes back to, who are you? If you're a photographer or cinematographer, why are you doing what you're doing? You didn't pick up a camera and start to shoot weddings or whatever you're shooting and say, I'm shooting weddings because I want everybody to like me. I'm shooting weddings because I want, to be published all over the place. Because I'm sure, even if that is a goal, that's okay. So that one's a little shaky, but there's still a deeper why. Publications might be like underneath your why, but return back to your why. Go back to your roots, okay? And then the next thing is you want to try whatever you fear. Like I said, if I'm struggling with off-camera flash, I really want to learn off-camera flash, and I know someone who's a great resource, like I mentioned, Daniel in Texas. Hey, Daniel, can I come to you, or can I fly you out to teach me, or can I take your webinar or your workshop? Get over your fears. I'm telling you, as soon as you do it, you're going to go to that next shoot with your off-camera flash strategy because you know how to do it, and you're going to kill it. Okay? The next thing is reframe your words. So I'm gonna hit on 3 different ways that you can start to do this. So whatever you are trying to do as a photographer or a cinematographer, instead of saying I can't do X, what you need to say is I need to learn how to do X, or I'm not good at how to do X, so I need to learn how to be better at it, or you know what I mean, or find a resource. If people are coming to you with opinions, you need to learn how to block those external contributors. like I said, unless they do life with you, they are a positive influence or they're giving you constructive criticism, all the others need to go. They're not feeding you, they're not helping you. And I'll give you guys an example. Benjamin Davis of Yamin Studios, awesome guy. He's in Jersey. I was putting out my commercial for, this was the end of 2015, 2016. I was putting out my commercial for my company, and I sent it to him. I don't know why I randomly sent it to him. And I was like, hey, what do you think of this? And he was like, this is really good, but you need some stabilization. He just started throwing all these things out. And I was like, in that moment, I could have said, going through the 3 tiers, right? I could have looked at him as a superior because his work is phenomenal. And I could have been like, man, I'm never publishing my commercial because his work is just awesome. Or I could have gotten fragile and said, well, he said it sucked, so I'm not going to post it. And nobody will know that my company exists. Or like I did, I had the interiority, which said, you know what? Some of his CC is applicable and I'm going to change it. And you notice what I said, some, because not everything was to my style and what I needed. So I fixed some of the things that were applicable and then I left it alone. I came back to the video and I looked at more of his CC and I said, you know what? I get why he's saying what he's saying. And I went back and fixed the other things that I wasn't able to fix right away because I had to process why it was important to fix those things, okay? So that's a good example of that, of reframing your words and dealing with, okay? So the last thing, and this is the bonus for you guys, is I want you guys, I don't care if you've been shooting for 5 years, 3 years, 1 year, 6 months, if you have a successful business and you're making 6 figures or 5 figures or whatever you're making a year, I want you to grab a success journal. And this is a tracker, and I do have an example of this, and hopefully I can get it to Ruby in time. But I want you to grab a success journal, and you're not boasting, but I want you to, when you go through or you feel this way, or just in general, start writing down the things that you've accomplished, the things that you've been successful with, because they will serve as reminders. You can even go as far as printing it on computer paper and writing down, I don't know, published in Mona Lucci or published in the Huffington Post or published in the Knot, and place it, around different places of your office. If you want to get, real technical, you can frame it. I have certain things around my house that are reminders. This is not boasting. These are reminders. You think that Beyonce and Toni Braxton and all these people who have Grammys, that they don't have their Grammys in a nice little, I can't think of the word right now, but a curio or something that allows them to see? Of course they do. So you can look at it as just like little trophy reminders. If you don't want to be as blatant, you can maybe put it on a Post-it note or an index size card, and you can place them around. But start with a journal, because this will allow you to develop that relationship between, you know what, I am good at what I do. Like I said, you can even get a little notebook, and use it that way. Whatever you feel can serve as a journal, you need to be committed to it. So what I would like for you to do is either every other week, write down your accomplishments. And accomplishments do not have to be, I shot an awesome wedding. It could be, my numbers as far as doing your accounting were good this month. I'm killing it. Whatever you want to say to yourself, you can write those things down too. If you want to do something simple, like, you know what, I'm great for my 3 friends. Whatever it is, you need to start reframing, like I said, reframing your words, reframing your mindset, so that you have a better understanding that your brain can be rewired. Because where I want to see you is the interiority. I don't want to see you in the inferiority tier. And I hope that a lot of you are not practicing superiority. The problem with that is we could be practicing that and don't realize it, but that is actually a form of imposter syndrome as well, because you need to be around people who, like I said, are less talented, that are less talented, that cannot do what you can do, because that feeds your ego. So they're both bad. Both inferiority and superiority are both bad. You want interiority. So guys, that's pretty much it. I hope that you know, got something. I know that it has helped me. I wanted to pay, you know, enough respect to all those speakers and not take up your time. If anybody wants to write me personally on my website, there underneath the contact tab in the menu bar, there's a tab that says Ask Anesha. If you are dealing with imposter syndrome or you need someone to talk to, you can go to that page and there's a button that says Start Recording and just share your story. I don't know if there, I think there's like a 5-minute limit, so you gotta kind of condense. What I would recommend is maybe write down what you want to tell me, put it in bullet points so you can kind of get to it and not get that cutoff time. If you don't want to do a recording, you can also, there's a link there that will tell you another way to submit it. But if you're dealing with imposter syndrome, like I said, don't feel weird. You're not alone. A lot of people have dealt with it. And it can definitely stop you if you don't deal with it. And that's why I wanted to really talk about this topic, because you shouldn't let it stop you. You need to push forward. You are great. You are good enough. Surround yourself with the right people. You're not meant to get with everybody. Know who you are. Use my prescription to help you make through it. And I'm excited to hear the successes and what you've accomplished by learning more about imposter syndrome.